These people are crazy. If there were any survivors down here, they'd probably open the door and welcome the raiders right in.
It says it was open from the outside.
No. They'd need a pit boy to open the door.
They had one.
Whose?
My mom's.
Come along with us on an idle ride through the latest science fiction and fantasy shows, movies, and video games. Welcome to Idle Ride. I'm Marcy, your host, here with my co-host and chosen brother, Paul.
Here to be a co-host and chosen brother.
And we will be talking about episode 4 of the Amazon Prime Fallout TV show called The Ghouls. And it's definitely all about the ghoul.
There's a lot of smoothie action going on in it, but it is about ghouls.
And before we get started, I do want to apologize to the audience. I'm currently in a huge remodel of my house, literally living in a basement, and the whole top part of my house was removed. So I'm in a 325-foot square little apartment downstairs, and there might be some banging and some drilling going on.
I actually like to imagine that, like, there's a listener in New York City that's like, 325 square feet, that's amazing.
Probably there are some people that live in teeny little apartments. We're just making an enormous home now.
Yes, it's supposed to be so that I can retire there because I'm a loser.
Yes, my chosen brother and also sometimes son, Paul, can come live with us once again. Again, apologize if there's some weird random noise that you hear, but, you know, I'd rather record than not record, so...
And if you hear what sounds like footsteps on the roof, we're going to blame Marcy, but it's actually me.
Yes, we've both got some sound.
We both have some sound.
So this episode is a kind of short episode, but I would say has some of the best lines of any of the episodes of this season. So good.
So we're just going to play an hour of lines with us laughing.
Well, that's the thing is, you know, I get clips for the episodes, and I literally was like, you can't get every one of the Ghouls lines as a clip. So I will be attempting to pretend to be the Ghoul because I've written some of them down so that you can hear them. But maybe I'll make Paul be Lucy, and then I can be the Ghoul.
Send me the script.
Either way, it's an amazing episode. It's funny, it's poignant, it's got a lot of Fallout lore in it. So in a short little episode, it really packs a good punch. We start out with Lucy and the Ghoul. And again, as Paul and I always say, we love the journey. We really love seeing the environment that our characters are in. And again, they start with that, which I love, that you get to see them walking through the wasteland, and both of them are not doing really well.
Mm-hmm.
So it opens with one of the giant cockroaches crawling on a building, and they're walking along, and you can hear the Ghoul. The Ghoul doesn't look very different, but he's kind of like wheezing. And Lucy, she is a beautiful woman. And like, they really make her look like shit.
Look like shit, yep.
I am so proud of this show. Like, they put this actor through so much. I know some of it's makeup, but I mean, it looks really good.
I'm pretty sure like it was in her contract that they really cut off her finger this episode. Spoilers.
Anyway, they did a good job of really making her look like she's going through it. So as they're walking by this hospital, old hospital, they hear somebody going, my name is Roger, and like talking to himself. And so they wander into this hospital and they meet another ghoul who knows the main character. The guy's name is Roger, or the character's name is Roger.
At least he says his name's Roger, and he gets called Roger, so.
And the actor who plays him does an amazing job. He has such a small spot in this episode, but it really illustrates the difference between somebody who's really nice turning into a horrible monster in a very short amount of time.
I was trying to see if I recognized the actor from anything, and I don't, but like his voice sounded familiar. So I looked him up on the Fallout Wiki, and there's a behind the scenes that I thought was really cool. A quote from one of the makers is like, "We've seen a lot of zombie shows and a lot of zombie movies. You haven't seen a lot where there's a zombie named Fred who likes mac and cheese and misses his mom." So like they're trying to make a relatable zombie.
Yeah, and I think this is a good picture of that transition, right? So our ghoul comes in and he's talking to Roger and they know each other. It starts out with Roger saying, well, hey, if I just had one hit of that drug or a puff of something, then I'd be okay. And the ghoul's like, sorry, dude,
No.
I don't have any. Yeah. And this is like a great moment because in most movies, I feel like they would have that character get pissed at the ghoul for not having it. And he's just like, okay, that's fine. Then you guys should probably get out of here because I'm going to go feral soon. And I love that. Like, you know, at heart, this ghoul, Roger, is, you know, a good guy. You can just hear it in his voice. And then when he transitions to the like biting part of the zombie, like it's such a great transition because he does it so well. He acts it so well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of little just tidbits of dialogue back and forth. Like he says smoothies can be so unkind. You know, that he's had a hard life around us non-nuclear irradiated folk.
And I thought we could talk a minute about ghouls. So
Okay.
I know that when I play Fallout, or my favorite character, Harold, that was an NPC, was a ghoul. And he is followed from Fallout 1 all the way to Fallout 3. You see him. And that was something that seared in my brain when I was playing those early games, that ghouls aren't necessarily bad, right? And then when Fallout 3 started it, but Fallout 3 and 4 started this feral ghoul thing,
Right.
where they became like cannibals, like fast zombies that would attack you and try to kill you. And I was like, what is this? Like, I remember being really kind of pissed off in Fallout 3 that they were portrayed this way, because in my mind, I always thought of them as just like regular people who looked gross and lived a long time, you know? Just like anybody, some can be bad and some can be good. So I really like that one of the main characters is actually one of the irradiated creatures. It makes it more interesting to me.
That's cool, because I think we've said before that my introduction to Fallout as a series was Fallout 3. So it's like, ew, a bunch of zombies called feral ghouls. And then like the first time you see a ghoul that's not feral, it sort of sticks out in your mind.
Yeah, for sure. So Roger is talking to the ghoul, and the ghoul asks him, oh, what is one of your favorite memories? And he mentions apple pie and ice cream. And then Roger's like, oh, yeah, you know, mac and cheese. And like my mom used to make me, and blam! He shoots Roger and puts him out of his misery.
Also
Misery.
Puts his memory all up on that wall.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of shocking, and it's shocking to Lucy. She's sitting there listening to the stories. They cut to her, and she's like smiling as he's describing his mom, and then she's like shocked when he dies.
Which, it's not a complicated trick, but it's excellently executed. You don't show the ghoul pulling out his gun and aiming at his head and pulling the trigger, so it's just as shocking to you as it is to Lucy, who's also not looking at him.
Yeah, exactly. It is a good framing of that kind of scene.
There's also a bit in the back and forth before he blows Roger's brains out, when they're asking if he had any of the drugs, it kind of pops out that the ghoul is like one of the oldest ghouls, and it's sort of known that he's been there forever. And the ghoul throws out the line that you got to be good at money to make money. And I was like, that's such a good metaphor for like the US system in general. Like, you got to have money to get healthcare or good jobs or freaking anything.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about. I would imagine he had a myth surrounding him because he's been around since the beginning. So they have created this idea of who he is, even though nobody actually knows who he is anymore.
I mean, he doesn't look like the other guy very much.
Mm-mm.
Oh, also, that's not the only mention of pie and broadening to cake in this episode. So
yes, actually, I was going to say there's some parallels here. It's very smart that they go between Lucy and the ghoul, and then the next scenes are in the vault.
Yeah.
Then the ghoul goes straight to, like, immediately goes over to the guy and just starts removing stuff from his pockets, pulls out some teeth. As we've learned from the previous episode with Max, teeth are very valuable. And then he turns him over and he starts cutting pieces of him off.
His backside.
And literally takes a raw bite of human meat. And Lucy loses it, of course. And this always happens to me. I'm like, I'm going to eat in front of the TV so I can watch this. Last night I was going to watch this episode again. And like, I'm eating. And then Andrew's like, good job, Marcy. Because like the next scene is this cannibal scene. And I'm like, ugh. I was like, okay, I can't watch this while I'm eating. Happens every time, like, I pick a gross movie or something to watch while we're eating. But anyway, so I don't know, have you ever played as a cannibal in any of the Fallout games or any games that you've played?
I think I have a pretty strong, hard pass on playing as a cannibal. I don't even particularly love picking up, like, animal hides in games. It just feels like if I were the character and I was carrying the 300 pounds of deer hide or whatever, like, aren't I going to smell like shit? So yeah, it's dumb, but it's kind of like a visceral, I don't really want to do that.
Yes, like, I can't even, because you kill these mongrel dogs in Fallout, and I'm like, never going to eat dog meat. Sorry, no, I know his name is Dog Meat, but I'm not eating dog, and I'm not eating human. But you know there's people that are like, I'm going to go the darkest route. Like, what does that say about you if you can fake in a game eating people? Like,
I think the only group of players that I give a complete pass on are 100% completionists.
Uh-huh.
And they usually do all the good endings. They're like, okay, guys, it's going to get dark now.
Oh, it's so gross. Well, but it's part of the game. So I was shocked when I first watched it, like, that they actually did the cannibal route. And it makes sense. Like, if he survived this long, he probably had to do the darkest of the dark, which he is doing, in my opinion, right now. Cannibalism is pretty dark. It's the darkest that you can go is eating another person. But
darker
like
than fruitcake, you think?
Is there human meat in fruitcake? I don't know.
No, but I think a lot of people hate fruitcake, so
yeah.
As much as human meat. It'd be an interesting test, but yes, continue.
I mean, I guess there has certainly been historical examples of people like eating people who have already died to survive. It's something that humans have done, but there's a reason it's taboo. I mean, we don't want to be hunting other people to eat them.
We don't want to be able to say with confidence what human meat tastes like, because that's just really awkward to talk about at the dinner table.
Also, we learned from a long way back when we did the Last of Us season that we can call this venison.
Venison.
Because venison is like any kind of meat, right?
That's right. That's right.
So he's just getting some venison. But we do have a clip from this scene because there is a very good line from this.
You know, my vault has endured hardship too. In the Great Plague of 77, everyone had to quarantine. They couldn't work the farms together. People Starved. My mother included. My dad dropped to 128 pounds, and he still refused to do anything like this. What? What's so funny?
You.
Well, that's what people say they did and what they really did. Well, I bet your daddy was first in line at the cookout. I bet he had a bill with a drawing of his neighbor's ass on there.
How do you live like this? Why keep going?
Well, one good question deserves another. Why the fuck am I doing all the work? Now, come on, Vorty. Ass jerky don't make itself.
Oh, that line.
Oh. Ass jerky don't make itself.
I have to find a way to just fit that into regular life.
It is funny how we respond to cannibalism scenes. Like, I think you can either be horrified and disgusted and never watch it again, or you can do what we do, which is laugh about it and then make a joke about
Tainted meat?
tainted meat.
Tainted
Yes.
meat!
Tainted meat from the Walking Dead scene.
Yes. What I really want to know about this episode is if the writers were inspired by Alex Jones when they wrote that. Because there's the famous thing where he's like, you know, if the human civilization collapses, I'm going to eat my neighbor's ass. And he meant like this. But everyone, of course, was like, ha, he's an ass eater.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they, well, first of all, are committed to the game.
Mhm.
And I think they're taking a lot of stuff from, was that a book or a movie? I don't even know who you're talking about.
About Alex Jones?
Yeah.
Oh, let's keep it that way. He's the Sandy Hook commentator that got like the parents harassed by all of his right-wing asshole followers and
Oh.
recently lost some major lawsuits where I believe he's fully bankrupt enough that he might actually sue me for calling him a piece of shit. And good job, Alex. You'll make like $500.
Okay. So anyway, I think they like taking things from other stuff. And that's what the game did, and that's what the show is doing.
And also that's what Walton Goggins does, because Marcy and I have recently started watching Vice Principals, and his character in that is very ass-focused.
Yes, and like fucking hilarious. Walton Goggins, he's not afraid to play these characters that do things that might make us uncomfortable, right? You might hate this ghoul for doing this to Lucy, but he's teaching her a lot of lessons about the wasteland in a very
That's
short
true.
period of time.
And he's not kind about it, but in a way he is helping her.
In this scene, he says, "Why am I doing this? Because you're going to be eating this anyway, so you get to it. It's time for you to butcher this guy."
Yeah, and like he was the first one to walk up on the dead body of Benjamin.
Uh-huh.
And so he knows that she's capable of this.
Yeah, he knows that she doesn't shy away or can disassociate from these kinds of moments.
Right.
And so, yeah, she does it. She takes the knife. They cut to black, but you know that she helps him to butcher this other ghoul that they've just killed. The next scene is a vault scene with Norm, her brother, and I really love the instant transition from her going through this horrible stuff to the two guys vying for overseer in the vault, like looking at a raider who's all trussed up in a cell and drinking coffee and talking about the prisoner, but they're not afraid of this guy. They don't know really what this person has gone through. They're talking shit about him like he's an animal.
Yeah, they say this creature. So
Yeah.
they're very clinical and detached from, you know, the violence that is just a few feet away from them.
And you're seeing maybe what had to happen to this person for him to become this animal, quote unquote, that they're talking about through the journey of Lucy. And so they're both trying to be overseers, so they're putting up their little posters, but they're kind of friends anyway. And then it transitions to Norm, who's kind of looking at his pit boy, and a grainy photo of his dad in the green and black of the pit boy, which I like. And then Betty, who's like the third of the three kind of heads of the vault.
The overseer triumvirate.
Yes. Shows up with some pie.
Rhubarb pie.
Yeah, so this was the first, in my opinion, like connection that we see to the conversation that Walton Goggins had where he mentions Mother's apple pie. And then the very next scene, we have somebody who's in the wasteland getting some pie. So like how removed the vault characters really are from reality.
That's such a good way to tie those elements together. Mia's just like, there's 3 dessert references in this episode. I'm hungry.
Well, yeah, but I mean...
No, I like yours better.
Well, good, because I think it does make sense that they keep doing it.
Yep.
Because you're like, oh, these guys have no idea of reality. Like, the ghoul hasn't had a pie in 300 years, and these assholes are down in the vault like, we're eating pie for lunch every day.
Oh, we had a starvation in 2377 or whatever.
So Norm kind of talks about how he regrets not doing anything during the raid that he hid. And Betty is trying to simultaneously like console him, but also be like, don't do crazy shit. And I've got that clip because I really like what she says about that.
Regular boys can get angry and they'll just pee on the wall. And clever boys like you are angry. You're lucky not to have seen where that can lead.
So far.
Just tread lightly. That's all I ask.
First of all, I wonder who this other boy is. I'm wondering if it's McLean, her dad. But, like, she knows, she's seen the writing on the wall that Norm is feeling upset about not doing anything. And she doesn't want him to take any other steps to do something about what's going on.
Okay, I was conflicted on that because the way she said just tread lightly, it almost seemed like she could have been saying like, I approve of your wanting to like kill these raiders or whatever. Just, don't go too far. Like, be careful about it.
Yeah, I mean, she could potentially be supporting him in that moment. I feel like she knows that she couldn't really stop him if he wanted to do something about it. So maybe she's trying to reduce the impact that he could potentially have if he learned something. But yeah, your take is a good look at that scene.
It's not without support.
Yes.
Because as they said in Jurassic Park, he is a clever girl.
Clearly, that's a very short scene that they have there. And then they transition back to Lucy and the ghoul, and she still has her Pip-Boy on. I think it's interesting that the ghoul doesn't give a shit about her vault tech, which, when you're playing the game, that's all you care about, like vault tech. That's going to be like cool shit. And we know he grabs
teeth for money, but he doesn't want her Pip-Boy for money? Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
it's hers, so he can wait till she's dead.
It's true. So they go buy some water that's radiated, and he starts mocking her, and this is like the beginning of him basically just mocking her constantly and her ideals. And like I said before, everything that he said is clippable, and so we're gonna do a little play out of one of the lines. So Paul, your line is, "What are you?" That's what she says.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna be the ghoul.
Okay, I'm gonna Pip-Boy on. I'm Lucy. What are you?
I'm you, sweetie. Just give it a little time. Such a good line. Like, he's prepping her that, like, you're going to have to change your morality to be in the wasteland.
You got to be hard to live here. You gotta drink toilet water.
So she does. Well, that's after I think she drank the toilet water because she's like, oh, like she's dying of thirst. She looks like shit. You can tell she hasn't had anything to drink for a long time.
I had a weird moment in that scene. It happened too fast for it to solidify, but very briefly I was like, oh, that's why he poured his water out instead of giving her any. He wasn't actually being malicious. It was just irradiated and he didn't want to poison her. And then he was smiling when she drank the poison water. And I was like, okay, so not that.
Well, he's illustrating that he can drink however much radiated water he wants. He doesn't care about good water.
Yeah.
And then, so he's down close to her face when he delivers that line.
Yeah.
And she headbutts him and starts running away as fast as she can.
Oh, right, because he starts having a coughing fit, too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
She's running and then she stops. And I realize now this is a very important site that she runs into. It's like an exploded out hole of a city. And later this area is going to be kind of important to the plot of the show. But
okay. Spoiler alert. Now I know.
I didn't recognize it, obviously, at the time, but now I do. And she stops because she's at like basically a cliff and he lassos her with his lasso, and it's always like fun to see these moments of him as Cooper Howard are still like in there. Somehow he still has his lasso rope. Like, gotta keep that around just in case.
You never know when you need to Indiana Jones someone.
And he grabs her and they're tussling, and then she bites his finger and rips it off and spits it out. And this is another great line of his where he goes, "There you are, you little killer." And then he grabs her hand. It's so like, he's such a fucking psycho. And you're like, I love you, Walton Goggins. Why are you doing this? And he pulls out his knife, which actually I think is a machete, because I did some machete research for myself. And it looks like a very specific type of machete because it's like super long. And he's got her hand, and it's like a perfect scene where they like are zoomed out and you can like see her finger, and he slices his finger off like he's slicing a carrot or something.
Yeah, like it takes at least 2 movements. It's not like a Hollywood like cut off the thing in one go. Like, he has to get through the bone.
Yeah, exactly. And so he slices her finger off exactly as she bit his off. And then says, "Now that right there is the closest thing we've ever had to an honest exchange so far." And I'm just like,
so
oh my
good.
God, so good. Like, because it's true. Like, that's your basest emotions, right? Is survival. And so he's teaching her that, like, eye for an eye, like, these are very basic rules of the wasteland that he's giving her those lessons.
And I believe I did all of her lines in those scenes too, because she said nothing. She just looked on in horror.
Yeah, exactly. So after that, like, shockingly violent scene, we transition to the vault again. And I like to make these parallels because there's the Ghoul and Lucy having this like super violent exchange of like, we are coming to know each other in a way that we don't like, or at least Lucy doesn't like. And then we've got Chet, and Chet opens the door to Stephanie, who's the pregnant best friend of Lucy,
With
who's
the
now
eye
got
patch.
the badass eye patch. And she's got a bunch of shit from her husband, Bert. And they just start talking about everyday stuff. It's like so sickeningly sweet, but also like has these really dark kind of undertones to it all. I don't know how you felt about the scene.
My takeaway is that to people in the vault, everything has to be sort of like 1950s small talk, even when it's the darkest shit that's ever happened. You know, like they could be talking about cannibalism in the same way that they're talking about an apple pie, or the way that they said that they hated the Raiders and they're mourning their dead. And it's just like, do. Yeah. I wrote, is this what Wisconsin is like?
Yeah, exactly. Like the Midwest are like, okie dokie. Yeah. So she's giving Chet all of her husband's stuff, and Then she starts hugging him after she's given him her husband's scarf and
like a sweater, right? Or like a cardigan?
She puts that over him, I think, after she starts kissing him. I don't know.
Well, they really
remember.
get into the kissing after he's got it on.
Yeah, I guess like she gives him all of his stuff and he kind of puts it on. And then as she's hugging him in mourning, she starts kissing him and saying, Bert, oh, Bert. And this is like one of my favorite almost sex scenes ever. Because he's like, yes, I am Bert. After he tries to like take it off, she's like, no, leave it on.
Keep it on,
like,
yeah.
Yeah. And then she makes him sit down and she's like starting to fuck him sitting in the chair. And then he starts fingering her. He goes, now that is one wet lady.
So
and
good.
I just was like laughing so hard. I love silly sex scenes.
Well,
they're like the funniest thing ever.
Then she gets up, takes 2 steps back, like her water breaks, presumably. I guess we're not supposed to. It could be wild, weird Fallout stuff.
Her water breaks.
Her water breaks, and she goes, Bert!
I mean, I guess she could have just had a Bert orgasm that like caused that much wetness. We don't know, but I'm pretty sure her water just breaks and she starts going into labor.
There's a good confirmation later, but yeah. I don't like to assume anything with weird Fallout logic.
It's true. Well, and Chet just looks shell-shocked.
Yeah.
It's such like a weird, funny juxtaposition between like Lucy going through all this shit and then Chet having this weird, strange sexual moment with her best friend.
And do you know what their relationship is specifically? Are they also cousins, or is it more okay for them to do stuff with each other?
Honestly, they don't think they talk about that later. You would think that all of them are related, but at the end of the season, you'll learn something special about her. But
ooh,
I think she was from one of the other vaults. Actually, remember they were talking about
right, because
how
all married couples have to be from different vaults. So
yeah,
okay. So it's even more okay.
She's not originally from Vault 33. That should give you a clue of what I'm like trying to give you clues about telling you things.
Yeah, we should know stuff about Vault 32 by now.
Sorry about the drilling. That's just what's happening. Somebody was getting drilled, and my house is getting drilled. Bert! The next scene, we get back to Lucy and the Ghoul. So the whole episode is between Lucy and the Ghoul and the vault.
So at this point, the scene is the Super Duper Mart, and they show that in like the wide pan shots. It's got like a couple letters removed, and it's very broken down, and I just thought that was super.
Super for the Super Duper Mart. Well, and the Super Duper Mart was one of the many places that you would see all over the wastelands. There's lots of the Super Duper Marts. It's fun. Again, they're bringing back the Fallout lore. All these places that they enter are all places that we've entered as a game player playing the game. And the Ghoul pushes a little intercom, and he says that he wants to sell Lucy to them for a 2-month supply of vials. So he says she's in mint condition. And then he's like, well, almost mint condition when he looks down at her finger.
Yeah. Nothing that Matt Berry can't fix.
Oh, yes, Matt Berry. We're getting there. They obviously go for the deal, and the Ghoul forces Lucy to go into the store.
Yeah, I like his force, too. It's very subdued and cold. Like, he pulls out his gun and aims it at her, and we've seen how much damage those fucking bullets can do. Like, the threat is real, but he does no more than the bare minimum to get her going.
Obviously, she knows that he means business, like he will kill her. It's not... Yeah. He's already shown that he will literally just cut her finger off. Whether or not she stays with the Ghoul or goes into Super Duper Mart, her life is not looking good at this point. So she goes into the store, and as she goes into the store, they cut back to the Ghoul, or they stay with the Ghoul.
Yeah.
And he immediately collapses. So you know that he's just been like holding on to frighten her as long as possible just to get her there. And so he's collapsed on the ground, and they cut back to Lucy, and she's walking into the store, and there's this like super happy-go-lucky, you know how sometimes grocery stores will have the music that's playing in the background, and we meet Mr. Handy, aka Snip Snip, aka Matt fucking Berry, my favorite actor, comedic person ever. Like, I love him so much. So you're going to get a really long clip of Mr. Handy because I love Matt Berry. I love What We Do in the Shadows. I think his line delivery is the best line delivery of any comedy show ever. When you watch him as Laszlo, I think I crack up at every single line that he does. Every single line.
He's great in the IT Crowd. He's great in Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. Yeah, he's just the same kind of pompous douchebag sound, but like he can play it in different ways.
Yeah, I just can't imagine anyone better playing the role of the Mr. Handy.
Matt Berry.
Apologies for the mess. Time flies by lately. Especially since my temporal sensors went out in the Great War. That must have been a week ago at least. Would you mind taking a seat on that gurney in front of you? Now, what have we here? Too fat, too withered. Ah, this one will do it.
He's looking at
You're lucky
nasty
I don't have
fingers
to use
in a drawer.
Our finger inventory's in a sorry state.
Finger
Now,
inventory.
Give me your hand. Okay, you're going to feel a slight pinch.
Thank you.
I say.
I really do appreciate this. But listen, a big fish ate my head, and I need my head to get back to my dad.
That's much better, isn't it?
Thank you.
Not a problem.
That feels really, really nice.
Now, would you prefer a dressing of high-quality synthetic fibers, classic cotton, or a comforting synthetic cotton blend?
You have real cotton?
Of course. Don't you?
Silly.
Thank you. You know, that creature that brought me here,
You seem unhappy.
he did not treat me very courteously.
Really?
When I pointed out that he wasn't following the golden rule, he put a leash around my neck and he made me drink from pot of water that I'm pretty sure was just some kind of animal pee.
Well, that is interesting.
I mean, I thought I was here to be a sex slave.
What? No! What a disgusting idea! I'm simply going to harvest your organs.
So good.
So amazing.
Simply just going to harvest your organs.
I love how, like, my temporal sensors have been out. The Great War must have been like a week ago, right?
So good. That's why I left that part in. I was like, where can I cut this scene? I'm like, I really can't. Like,
Nope.
It's only a very small part where you hear his voice, but I was like, this is one of the best scenes of the whole episode.
There's also something really, like, wholesome about, like, so a vault dweller is about as close as you can get to, like, someone from the same time frame as Mr. Handy. So, like, when they talk together, it's like two people speaking a language that we don't quite speak. Like, they sort of fit in a way. Like, he was very discourteous. Oh my.
Yeah, like his vernacular is from her time.
Yes.
And so they meld well, but they're outside of their time, kind of. And so the things that they're doing are brutal and weird. That's what makes it so crazy to watch this show and so fun, is that dichotomous idea of like 1950s housewife has to become a murderous cannibal.
Yeah. I'm shocked at sex slavery, but I'm here to harvest your organs.
So they cut back to the vault and Norm and Chet. Norm is doing his one duty that he hates, which is bringing food to the prisoners. And it's the cake that you mentioned earlier. So another dessert. And he does not like the idea, obviously, of bringing probably what seems to be the best dessert of the vault, because the jailer woman who's sitting in front of the raiders is like, they're getting Jell-O cake! Like, she was very upset about that.
Like, who do I have to kill to get Jell-O cake?
Seriously. And so he gives the raiders like one piece and he's like, you want to take the rest of it? She's like, yeah. So she leaves with the cart of Jello cake and he's left talking to the raiders. No, I don't really remember the dialogue, but...
He starts with, what are you looking at? And he's like, a murderer in a cage.
Oh, yes. And he's like, you killed innocent people is what Norm says. And then the raider implies that Vault 32 was not innocent.
Anything but innocent, yep.
Yes. And so this clues Norman that maybe he should take a second look at Vault 32 because they've already been over there, him and Chet.
I think he also, like, denied killing them, which makes sense. But, like, you know, when you think, oh, you killed all of Vault 32, it's like, no, we just kind of found an empty place. It's a little different.
It is
They
different.
still did kill a bunch of Vault 33 people, but...
Yeah. They're not as animalistic as they want to think that they are. They're
right.
just people who have had to do terrible shit, right? And if they were with Moldaver, I mean, Moldaver appeared to be someone of note, and like the guy who screwed Lucy was like, that was the best night of my life. Sorry, I still have to kill you. Like, it's not like they aren't human. They're just, you know, bad people.
Yeah.
Norm is a clever boy, so he goes to his computer and does what clever nerdy boys do and is like trying to check on the information from Vault 32 but gets denied access. So he decides to go find Chet to go on a little adventure into Vault 32. And so he knocks on Chet's door and Chet's still wearing Bert's sweater and looks like a deer in the headlights, like, because Stephanie's giving birth in the background.
And there's great little touches everywhere. Like the sweater that he's wearing is just like bulbed out like it's used to being stretched where the Pip-Boy is. Because they never take off their Pip-Boys. And yeah, like there's all kinds of activity in the background. It's a great little shot.
And it's actually like one of those sweaters that looks like a smoking jacket, like from the 1950s. Yeah, it's a very funny scene that Norm just shows up and is like, you want to get out of here? And just like, yes, I do. I do. He is not ready to be a dad.
Like, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't even have sex.
Yeah, like that's what's kind of implied is she's arrived and she wants to have like somebody to help her raise her kid, basically. And I think her going to that apartment was part of a plan for sure. But Norm gets Chet and they go to Vault 32. And again, this is part of this journey that we've been talking about. They talk about it, but you get to observe a bunch of things in the vault before there's like a lot of discussion about what happened to the vault, right? And you as the audience get to see it along with Norm and Chet. This is like being in the video game. You go into a vault and like you start seeing all kinds of weird shit and you're like, what happened in here?
Yeah, and you're like, oh, all of this corn has been fallow for a long time. It looks terrible. And, oh, the lights are still working, but they're very on the fritz. And if you trust them to tell the story with atmosphere, you can get a cool story.
Yeah, and kind of like we talked about when we were discussing the games, the scene where they come on a guy watching a rat maze video that's probably like driving him mad, and then somebody stabbed with a spear and
some choking, like bones on neck bones.
Yeah, so there's definitely like a vibe that's happening in this vault.
And my favorite one was the foosball table thing used as a skewer.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. Things don't appear to be normal in this vault. That maybe it wasn't raiders, but something else.
Right, because the blood graffiti is saying stuff like, we know the truth, which I would not be scrawling that kind of stuff if I was bleeding out. But who knows if maybe there's a fungus in the air.
I feel like this is like classic video game thing, though, that
yes,
people will like write graffiti on the walls with their blood like all the time in video games. Like you come across a body, don't trust so and so. It's kind of like in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and there's yeah.
And it's always the most important detail is smudged out, and you're like, God damn it.
So that's kind of it. They're sort of talking about this does not seem to be like raiders killed these people. Like, it looks like they went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we transition back to Lucy, where she's walking along.
Oh, you just skipped the funniest, weirdest part.
Oh, well, okay.
So there's an advertisement, a billboard of like fresh ice cream, and there's like two happy looking people, and they got their little cups of ice cream, and then there's like neon blinky lights in the shape of drops going from the cow's udder to their cups, and it kind of looks like the cow's just jizzing in their ice cream.
Ew, I didn't even like notice that.
Yeah, so the first thing you see is the cow, like.
Well,
it's just atmosphere. It doesn't matter that much. It's just, it looked gross to me.
That's cool that you noticed that. Like, I'm certain I probably just skimmed over it, because the next moment is Snip Snip pushing Lucy along in a gurney past all these ghouls stuck in like refrigerators or like freezer bays that have like the windows still. I feel like a ghoul could easily break out of that, but, you know, whatever.
Yeah, especially a lot of them are still fully cognizant.
The Snip Snip has a conversation with these two, like, stoner raiders that are just watching television and are in control of what happens to the drugs. And apparently they're exchanging drugs for body parts. And the Snip Snip gives them the deal that the ghoul wants. And they're like, yeah, we can afford that. Like, make sure to cut her up right now, because we need to send her out with the next shipment.
You're making them sound way more put together than they looked in the episode. Like, to me, it's like Jay and Silent Bob fall even further apart. And you're like, yeah, just make sure that, yeah, they're just like, I guess. And they, like, dig through their rashes, like, yeah, we could do 2 months.
It's because I'm a peppy person. It's hard not to like sound peppy when I'm doing the impressions of these people. But yeah, they're very stoner. Like, I was going to say that. Just imagine Clerks or something. Yeah. Like, imagine a Jay and Silent Bob types. That's a good idea. And so he pushes her past some freezers that have body parts in them. And I'm pretty sure that in the games, when you would go to raider camps and like kill the raiders, they'd always have like body parts hanging from hooks. And I feel like they took an exact graphic of some of those and like put them in that one of the freezers that they walk by, because it's like, that looks a lot like when you play a video game, you see the things that repeat sometimes. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that looks like the torso from the video game that was hanging from a meat hook. But if it is, that's pretty crazy that they went that level of detail to get a torso that looks just like the one from the meat hook in the game.
So if that's the case, that means there's at least one person out there who has a pattern of neurons in their brain that's like the torso from Fallout, and then had the power to put that in there and activate your pattern of neurons that also says the torso from Fallout. They secretly talk to you, Marcy.
I know. It's fucking nuts, though, that your brain keeps those patterns like from the video game, but because, you know, they can't make everything unique, there's going to be enemies that you fight, they say the same thing over and over again, and you know, it's just like repeatable. So anyway, that was pretty funny to me.
Unless it's The Last of Us 2, where each individual character that you kill has a name and might be referenced as like, oh, they killed Jamie.
Oh no. So Mr. Handy is ready to kill Lucy. And I also realized that any non-human that she's trying to negotiate with, she always says, sir. She's like, sir, don't do this to the robot. So I always think it's just like, she did that with the ghoul at first. She was calling him sir throughout. And he's like, okay. And he whips out this giant like bone saw, recipita saw that's going to come down and slice her. And she kicks it with her legs out of the way.
This won't hurt a bit. And then slowly, horror movie, like pushes it towards her chest.
Good job, Matt Berry. Great job. And somehow she escapes off of the gurney and grabs like the paddles of a defibrillator and then shocks him to death.
So this is where I think a hovering unit is probably not the best tool for the job. Because, yeah, she didn't have her feet tied up, and she kicked the arm of, holding the circular saw blade. And so it knocks him out of the way. Like, he's hovering. Like, yeah, there's a lot of, like, you can move that
physics
with a little,
and things.
yeah, with physics. And then he goes, "Excuse me."
Well, he originally was made to just be a helper.
Yep, and so he's apologizing for not cutting her up properly.
He's a medical Mr. Handy, so the expectation would be that you would be knocked out not kicking at him.
It's true, and yeah.
But you're right, it is interesting to think about. A lot of the robot enemies are hover enemies, so all you would have to use is like a little push to get them to go far away from you, but they also have propelling jets.
They do, so it's a small mercy that she took advantage of.
Yes, exactly. So the next scene is again the stoner raider bros who are sitting there, and she arrives. Somehow she's gotten the Mr. Handy to work again and has taken him hostage, which I can go with it. Sure, she can do this. She smart.
Zapped his neurons. Like, who knows what is going on in his processor now.
One of her main things that she's good at is science, as she described in the very first episode. So she scienced him to become a hostage for her.
And more, we'll find out in a second.
She's got him and is like, if you don't let me go, then I'll kill this robot. And they're funny because they're like, that's like saying that you're going to kill a toaster. Like, we don't give a fuck about that. And then she pulls out the Mr. Handy syringe gun and is like, well, I figured you'd say that. And so I refilled all of his syringes with Abraxo Drano cleaner.
Which they did briefly show on one of the counters while she's struggling with the thing. Like, a bunch of supplies and an Abraxo box tipped over. So that was pretty cool.
And that's one of the classic things that you find in Fallout is Abraxo cleaner. It's like a chemical that you can use to make drugs and things.
Yeah. So I clearly have that neuron pattern of like, Abraxo, I can use that.
And so they're freaked out, and she's like, I want you to let me leave. And then she points at the ghouls that we briefly mentioned that were in the refrigerator. She's like, I want you to let them go too. And so they push a button because she shoots the drain cleaner at them, and they're like freaked out. So they push a button.
She doesn't shoot just yet.
Yeah. She does.
The way it goes is she says, I want you to release them too. And they're just like, okay. And they release most of them, but not the feral ones.
Oh, yes. You're right. So I guess we also forgot to mention that when she was going by on the gurney, there was one ghoul
Martha.
that was like, my name is Martha. My name is Martha.
And Batman was like, what's your name?
So they let all the non-feral ghouls go, and one of them says thank you to her as they go away. And then they won't release all of them. And she had seen the Martha ghoul, and so had like an emotional connection or whatever in that one moment. And so she wants them to let Martha go. No, lady, you don't want us to do that. And then she shoots.
She's tired of talking at this point. She's been sirring and pleasing for days now. And she's like, no, I have the power. You're just going to do what I say.
Exactly. And so they do push the second button, and then 3 or 4 like feral ghouls come out.
And like a video
Martha.
game, no, more like a D&D game. Each one picks a target.
Yeah. And she pushes the Mr. Handy out of the way and like leaps into some of the aisles to get out of the way. And then like everybody dies. All the ghouls get shot and all the guys get killed by the ghouls.
It's perfect.
Lucy's like, whew. And then she steps out. Martha's still there going, my name is Martha. And Lucy tries to calm Martha down from her going feral state, but can't do it.
If only she knew more about the meds, she could have just thrown some to Martha. And like, it might have been too late, but like,
Right
maybe
into her mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, like she does have science and medicine. Maybe that could have been like one of the choices in the video game. Do you shoot Martha with a syringe of the feral ghoul drug? Yes.
But she failed that science check.
She did fail. She did. I also noticed that Martha had a locket.
Oh.
And every time you kill a ghoul, There's not much on their bodies, but you almost always will find like a locket on the ghouls. And I feel like that might be a callback to whenever you kill a ghoul, you find lockets on them because they were human once and have memories. Like that's their memory of being human.
Like they don't have much, but they kept that last vestige.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just gum, but... So Martha does unfortunately go feral, and Lucy had looked down and there was the classic beginning game gun, the 10 millimeter, just lying there. And she picks it up and kills the Martha Ghoul.
Right in that one leap. And then the dramatic pause, and she sort of sits up again because she had to fall back when she shot Martha. And then Mepper is like, "Pardon me, madam, could I help you have a better day?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah. No, thank you."
Yeah, he's like all knocked out, but like still trying to soothe her because he's a medical robot. That's funny. So she's kind of sitting there recovering, and they transition again to Norm and Chet, who, again, we get a lot of good visuals of walking through the crazy vault, and they get to the overseer's office.
Like, there are some people who look like they hanged themselves right outside the overseer's door.
They find the overseer, and he's been attached to his chair, I'm assuming by the rest of the vault dwellers who went cray-cray. That's when Chet starts saying things like, "They totally went insane! Like, this whole vault's crazy!" And Norm, again, does his hacking science nerdery.
He's the most capable person in the vault because he's done literally every job. He's capable and competent at all of them because he's bored at every job. And so, like, he could do literally everything.
I love this take of it, Paul, like that. He knows every possible way around the vault. Like, he knows everything about it. So, yes, I love this. I love this for Norm because that means his curiosity is going to take him to great places. He checks in to see with the computer what happened to the vault, and he learns that the door was opened, and Chet is thinking that obviously it was opened by these crazy people.
Right.
Like, they wouldn't care if somebody knocked on the door, they'd just open it.
But Norm's like, "I can just find evidence on the computer, brah."
And he does, and it turns out to be Rose McLean.
Mom?
His mommy was the one, at least her Pip-Boy was the one that opened the door.
Opened from the outside.
Which is a good distinction.
Also of note, there was some more blood scrawled on the wall that said "Death to Management," which kind of relatable. And I was just, obviously it's a game and it's a movie or a TV show, so like it doesn't need to have an answer to this, but it's been a few days, right, since the thing, probably a week. So, like, why has nobody checked out Vault 32 to this point? Like, shouldn't they have looked for resources that they could collect to help Vault 33? Shouldn't they have, like, done a pass and found the Overseer's room? And, like, shouldn't some of that have been done already?
Yes, that would be the correct thing to do. There is a small moment at the beginning when they go into Vault 32 where they pull some rubble away to get into it. So I guess everybody else in the vault just wants to ignore and leave it there because they don't want raiders to come in through Vault 32, right?
Because the door is open, presumably.
Right. So I kind of think it's that whole ignore it and it'll go away thing.
Okay.
Which the 1950s is a good time for doing that.
It's true. But you'd think they'd have at least a protocol of like, save your neighboring vault's corn so that you can also harvest those genes.
Or just like excavate into it so that you
Now
can
you have
more children and
double your
stuff.
population. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense to me, but not the show, I guess.
That's not where they wanted to go.
So that was a pretty quick little scene, and it returns again to Lucy, where she is looking pretty badass. She's coming out of the super duper mart and sees the ghoul laying there and helpless. And she kind of mocks him a little bit, scares him a little bit. And I do have the clip from this, but I do want both of us to think about being alive for 300 years. And this is the moment where he could have been killed, either for her just leaving him there or shooting him. I think the ghoul has maxed out his luck.
He has to have great luck at this point. Like, he's not moved since we last saw him. It may not have been more than an hour, but like, it is entirely possible that was his last ounce of strength. And when she drops the medicines for him, he's not strong enough to actually take them too. Like, he could have still died when she walked away.
Exactly. Like, she gave him a chance, but she knew that she needed to get away too.
Yeah, because he'll just lasso her again.
Right. Yeah, it's just like such a interesting, good scene. So let's listen to her little statement that she makes.
Yes.
I may end up looking like you. I'll never be like you. Golden rule, motherfucker.
Oh, it's so funny because this is the first time I think we've actually heard her curse too.
And that's what we call a vault mic drop.
Golden rule, motherfucker. This moment is good because, first of all, she lets the ghouls go against, better judgment, even the feral ones.
Yep.
I mean, she knew that some of them were probably going to go feral. And then she does this thing for our other main character, the ghoul, that is like, I'm leaving you alive against every instinct that you've told me I should have. So fuck you.
Yep. I should be trading you into these drug dealers.
Yeah, so that's a really good scene for her where she solidifies her morality here, that even if she has to do things to survive, she will still make the nicer choices.
Mm-hmm. So I had a question about this scene, and particularly how his ghoul ailment is different. So we saw Roger and we saw Martha, and both of them started saying their own names. And so that sort of hints to you that your identity disappearing, or just some obsession with your own name, is like one of these symptoms of this like final transition. Whereas our main character Ghoul, he just falls flat on the ground. So like, is he just different, or is he not in that phase of it?
Yeah, I feel like, because the Roger Ghoul says, it's been 28 days since I started showing signs.
Yeah.
So even though they all have to take the drug, I feel like when you turn feral, you start showing signs different from then like the drug keeps you staying sane, but you maybe transition faster into a feral ghoul if you start showing the signs of like losing your mind, basically. And he's never lost that sense of identity.
So over 300 years, he's had a continuous source of drugs, even in the beginning when no one knew about drugs and feral ghouls.
Well, there's a scene with your favorite character from Max's storyline, the Squire.
The Squire.
That tells us a little more about how people become ghouls.
Okay.
I guess I don't really want to spoil it too much for you because you're going to be watching it soon. But yeah, I think it's not super clear, all of the ghoul stuff.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be, but it just seemed like it was different in a way that seemed like it was just like, oh, he's a main character, so we just don't bother with that. Because the other two going through their ghoul phase didn't look tired particularly.
I think what happens is you need the drug, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're turning into a feral ghoul to need the drug.
Okay.
To live, you need the drug, basically.
Okay. And so
there's
clearly,
a distinction.
Yeah, it's not like an irreversible thing where like one day of missing your meds today means in 298 years, you're like one step closer.
Right.
Okay.
Talking about the ghoul, the next and final scene is of him. He did manage to get some of the drugs in his mouth, apparently. And he comes in and he sees the plethora of drugs. It wasn't just ghoul drugs. It was like every drug under the sun. he just like starts downing like everything. It's really funny scene. And he's like eating Coke. He's like drinking alcohol, like taking every
Squirting a
possible
syringe
drug
into his mouth with his tongue out.
Yeah. And then he sees the stash of Ghoul drugs, which is like more than he could ever need. And this is like always funny to me in scenes like with money, when people get a lot of money or whatever, they just start like tossing the shit around. Like, obviously you've never been poor. Like any person who's been poor would be like, oh, I gotta safely put these away. Like, they're obviously gold to him.
Yeah, you're not gonna American Beauty like that rose bed scene with something just because it's valuable and you finally have it.
Exactly. He, like, drops a bunch of the vials, and I'm like, what are you doing? Those could smash.
Like, do you have a second source even? Like, these are important to you.
Yeah, so he goes a little nuts with everything, and then he sees something playing on the television, and decides to sit down and watch himself.
Yeah, he pulls out the tape, and it reads, "The Man from Dead Horse."
Yes. And he puts it in, and it's like one of those old, weird, what was before VHS? It was like some other type of canister that you watch things with. I can't even remember what it's called, but it looked kind of like that, where it was like a cartridge that you would put in, and sits down, and it's the scene where he didn't want to shoot the bad guy, but I guess he gave in.
He gave in.
In this scene, it's Cooper Howard shooting the damn commie.
Yup, and I do like the parallel now that he's sitting watching himself, and the more naive, more heroic version of himself says, "Look who's ugly, strong, and has no dignity now." And it's like, himself.
Aw. Yeah, and you gotta like wonder what is going on in the Ghoul's head now. Is he seeing that moment as his morality changed, as when he decided to give in to that scene? But we'll see more about that storyline coming.
Yeah,
up,
maybe
like,
he'll be a better person
more.
next episode. We don't know. But one thing is very clear, is that he is sort of, at least temporarily, given up on the mission of finding that head, because she's running away. He could be tracking her, but he lays down on that couch and he watches a movie.
Yeah, he needs to recover a little bit from this journey, this moral journey that he's been on of trying to change someone. I think he wants her to become him, right? Because then that would mean
it would validate
who he has become.
Yeah.
But she doesn't, even
the
after
teacher
all
has
the
become
terrible...
the student.
Yeah, right. Fuck you, Ghoul. You can't change me. And so now he has to reevaluate, right? Like, could I be a good person again? You know?
And so the last thing we hear is, yeehaw!
Yeehaw, motherfucker. No.
Yippee-ki-yay.
That'd be funny if she just came back and shot him. Ha ha, tricking you.
I just had to find more ammo in this other house.
So yeah, that's how they end it, is with him sort of reevaluating himself a little bit. Again, a great episode. Such a good show still so far. Not a lot to complain about. Well, the next episode is called The Past. So any guesses about what that's about?
I think it's about somebody finds a time travel machine and goes to fuck with dinosaurs.
That'd be cool. Fallout and dinosaurs.
Ooh.
That'd be a really funny vault.
Maybe like a death claw saves them from a velociraptor, and they're like, "Thanks, velociraptor," and then like Vault Jurassic Park falls down.
I think that like anything is possible, because the vaults could have had like little embryos. Mm-hmm. They could have done some Jurassic Parking in the vaults. Like, you never know.
I love that as a verb, Marcy. That's great.
Jurassic Parking it. So go ahead and rate and review us if you like listening to this podcast, wherever you listen. And find us anywhere at Idle Ride or Idle Ride Podcast for your social medias. And can't wait to talk about the next episode.
Hell yeah. We're in the second half of the two halves of 4 episodes.
Woo!
Woo!
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.